So let's define what is the spiritual self, all right? So sabi ni William James, if you still remember the psychologist William James, spiritual self is one of the four constituents of the self. So the spiritual self is the most intimate. It's the most intimate part of yourself. It's the inner subjective part of the self. It is the most intimate version of the self. Bakit? Because of the satisfaction experience when thinking of one's ability to argue and discriminate, of one's moral sensibility and conscience, and of our unconquerable will is purer than all other sentiments of satisfaction. So because you have that, you feel that in your spiritual self, you have that ability to think, to argue, to discriminate. You have moral sensibility. You have moral conscience. And that moral sensibility and conscience may be seen through the expressions like religion, through your beliefs and practices. Similar with your cultural rituals, ceremonies. So these are just some of the manifestations what people believe in. And for William James, seeking the meaning of life is a journey. That is the spiritual self is on. So right now, what stage are you? Are you still on your journey to find your spiritual self? Can you feel your spiritual self? Are you taking care of it? Do you have that moral sensibility and moral conscience? Do you express your spiritual self by joining practices, by attending rituals or ceremonies? And when you do that, can you feel your spiritual self? Can you say that you're enriching your spiritual self? Or it's just a form of obligation for you? Okay? Let's define some more. Spiritual self, our emotions, and our five senses may only be portals or access points into experiencing our spiritual self. So, of course, your senses will act as the access because you need to experience things in order to feel and enrich your spiritual self. So, based on the things that you see, so ever since when you were small, based on the things that you hear, you feel, right? So, you perceive things, of course, through your senses. And based on your perceptions, you can sense, you can see, you can say that your spiritual self, I mean, you can sense, you can feel, you can find your spiritual self. So it only acts as your portals, your senses. Now, your spiritual self is you. It is you in your most beautiful. It is you in your most powerful form. It is your authentic self. Your spiritual self is the unconditioned part. It's the you without patterns. And Your spiritual self is personal for each of us, for each one of us. Our spiritual self is personal for each of us. So there's no need to feel that what that or I mean there's no need to get confused what is really a spiritual self, because it's very personal. It's something that you cannot compare, and you should not really compare because it's about you. So it's not something about the previous topic that we had, like material self. So sometimes we have similarities with our material self or physical self, but the spiritual self is different. It's unique. So you can say that there are some similarities with you and your partner when it comes to your spiritual self. It's personal for each of us, so no need to get caught up at the language. Now, spirituality is related to the sense of self-worth and an awareness of one's own life. Remember, spiritual self does not have to be, enriching your spiritual self does not have to be religious all the time. But of course, for some, they express it or they enrich their spiritual self by attending religious activities. But for some, it can be in a way of meditating, um, being alone. You dedicate time for your self reflection, because that is, as I've said, it's all about you. Okay, now William James theorized the components of the self, which he divided into two categories. So the self is composed of the me and the I. So for William James, the me is a separate individual a person refers to when talking about their personal experiences. On the other hand, the I is the part of the self that knows who they are and what they have accomplished in life. So let's have an example. What is this I uh, versus me? So in this statement, I know it was me who ate the cookie. So in this statement, the me is the empirical self. Okay. So meaning to say, it does the action, it does the acting, it is observed. Who ate the cookie? Me. See? Now the I is the self that is capable of thinking and reflecting. To maintain a sense of self-continuity across time, the I must create and connect the various me's. So for William James, um, it is a continuous journey. Okay, it's a continuous journey. It connects the past, your present, and future. So your I must create continuously, connect continuously to the various me's. So William James described the spiritual me as one's inner thought and feeling of the self. He referred to the spiritual me or spiritual self as the true, the intimate, the ultimate, and the permanent me, which which we are seeking. And that searching does not end. There's no required or limit language. I mean, there's no limit age. There's no limit time. The spiritual me or the spiritual self is further described as the sanctuary of your life, or it is the core sanctuary of your life. So your spiritual self is it's holy. It is something holy or sanctuary. It's core. It's the central part of your life. Or maybe until now, even if you're already 20, 30, 50, maybe you can say that you have not yet reached the point that you know already how I mean you are very aware of your spiritual self. Because this is something that's so deep. You get it's it's the relationship between you and yourself only. So maybe right now you're still not aware of your spiritual self. Now, a while ago, I told you, how can you express your spiritual self? I mentioned already that not all the time it has to be some religious activities, right? So you can try meditation. Try to pause for a while. Feel everything. Have you tried meditating? Feel your heartbeat. Feel the nature, feel the air. And maybe in the middle of that activity, you will feel, you will experience, experience, or you will realize that your spiritual self needs enrichment, more enrichment. That you're forgetting more. I mean, that you're forgetting about it already, because let's say we're all busy. We don't have time for this, so we're forgetting that kind of relationship to ourselves. That spiritual relationship to ourselves. So you try to meditate. So meditating can be done through uh, just going to a quiet place, even just at home. Download some apps that would help you meditate. Actually, it's something that's really hard to do. It's hard to concentrate. It's really hard to concentrate. Practice self awareness and knowing what's important to you. Read books about alternative ways to incorporate spirituality in your life. So, yun pa lang, dun pa lang, it's a miracle. Okay. Your physical self, physical body is a miracle. So, you should be thankful for that. And even just a short prayer, or if you don't call it a prayer, a short talk, a short conversation with that higher being, if you can feel, if you can find your spiritual self, well, that's good. But the question right now is starting now, what will you do to enrich your spiritual self and to know more about your spiritual self? What will you do now that you uh, that you've become aware of the spiritual self?